Welcome to the Local Marketing Source Weekly Update, brought to you by localmarketingsource.com.
This week's Local Marketing Update is brought to you by Scott Gallagher. Scott is the co-founder of Local Marketing Source and has become the recognized expert in providing online marketing services to local businesses. Follow Scott on Twitter at ScottGallagher5 and on Facebook.com/ScottPGallagher.
Hey, well, good afternoon, everyone. Scott Gallagher here with Local Marketing Source, bringing you our local marketing industry update. Now, next week's LMS member call is going to be Wednesday, March 15th at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central. Well, you know, some weeks we've got some busy weeks, other weeks we don't. I wasn't sure if they were even going to have a call, and Chicago is absolutely living true to its name of a windy city. We've got wind warnings all the city today, but I'll tell you a little bit of information, is that Chicago is not even in the top 10 city in the country in terms of windy. Everybody who comes here calls it the windy city, expects it to be windy, and it's really, sure, I guess on the lake it is, and sure, hey, it's bad. Power went out. My son's school power went out, but Chicago is called the windy city because of the early 1900s when there was, and needless to say, there still is, a lot of corrupt politicians that just like to yap their mouth off, and hence the name Windy City. But I didn't think we were going to have a webinar today or a podcast because the power was out for a couple of hours, and it was really loud. Never seen anything like it before, where there was enough power to light up a couple of things. The electronics in the office were kind of making weird noises, and things were just not firing up. You know, I had certain monitors that were on and a couple of lights or a light in the bathroom, but didn't seem like any electronics. Fortunately, they were back up right now. Getting some heat back in here. Well, this week we got 3 different things to cover, and I'm going to talk about Google Maps and some of the changes that are coming with that March 31st and how that works and what Level 5 local guides mean in regards to that. I'm going to have a little discussion about getting back to some of the basics of SEO, because, you know, it's become a very convoluted, complex industry to navigate through, and you know, being such a regulated industry, very deep, fragmented, you know, the competition landscape is greater than it's ever been. But, you know, I just got a new client last couple weeks, and it's turned out of Phoenix, and he has had 2 different SEO companies work over the last 3 years, and just wasn't getting certain results. He was paying a couple of grand a month to this company, and he didn't know what they did, and it included different marketing services and SEO, you know, a piece of that. And you know, when we started to look at the scenario, you know, it was tough, because even among his top profiles, he had napping inconsistencies. And you don't need to be an SEO to recognize that your business name should be the same name on Facebook that it is on Google, that it is on Yelp. And you shouldn't have to be a rocket scientist to know that that information, like phone number, should remain consistent among those elements. You know, McDonald's is one of the best branding companies out there, and one of the cool things about McDonald's is you can go into any McDonald's, and for the most part, they all look the same. They all use the same types of equipment generally around. The bathrooms are all generally clean. And of course, every single burger that they put out it tastes the same, regardless of which McDonald's you go to. A Big Mac in Canada tastes the same as one in America as it did when I was in South Korea or Australia. So brand consistency is very important, and when you're seeing different brand messaging on some of the major sites, well, what is this company for him? And I mean, it's only one of the 3 pillars that we look at in terms of profiles. There was no content that was there, no press releases, no articles. And well, his reviews were actually pretty good, but he couldn't understand why he wasn't making. what's going on here with my software. We good? Something weird's happening here with the software. I just want to make sure we're not having any problems. No hands are up. Nobody's typed any questions. I see Harry saying hi. Hi, Harry. What's up, dude? Yeah, I was digressing a little in regards to but the discussion of the basics of that, and I want to get back to discuss some of those fundamental basics that are going to get you your rankings, and then finally, when we're talking about contents, the first of the three pillars of CPR content, it's like people get confused by that. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to write an article. Well, let's face it, guys. Content in today's day and age is a type of digital media. It could be an article, a press release, an audio file, a video file. There's transcriptions that have come a long way in the last couple of years. YouTube knows exactly what you're saying. That's considered content and people and liked and shared and whatnot. So when we're discussing content, it's like, okay, well, what am I going to write about? Well, you may be the marketer or business owner, but the business owner ultimately has the best answer to that, and they just don't know that. Now, you've probably heard me talk about the circle of knowledge before. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, because when we live in the information age today, this information era, and the circle of knowledge encompasses that, where there's 4 quadrants within the circle, and the first quadrant is we know what we know. There's certain things I know. I know certain math. I know basic addition, that 2 plus 2 is 4. I know that. But then we start to move into the second quadrant, and we know what we don't know. So we're aware of the information that we don't have. I know I'm not a doctor, and I know that I can't perform surgery. I'm very well aware of the fact that I don't have information for that. Now, the 2 quadrants where it starts to get a little stickier. And the next one is we don't know what we know. We don't know what we don't know are the 2 remaining quadrants. And the third one is we don't know what we know. And that's where it starts to get a little dangerous, because far too often people hold themselves accountable, or they just present problems without a particular solution. So those people that don't know and tend to follow people. But the most dangerous quadrant is you don't know. And business owners very frequently operate in that quadrant. They don't know what they don't know, especially when it comes to their customers. And what's Harry saying here? It's coming through staticky. Let me see if I can change that. You're going to hear, I'm going to switch my computer. Okay. So it probably sounds different now. I was called in through the phone. My line in on my MacBook Pro for some reason doesn't work, and I've been researching this. And so I can't install a microphone on my computer right now. And it happened after I updated the OS. And there seems to be other people that are having this issue. It's just too quiet. So I've been trying to utilize other means of a microphone. But right now I've got to utilize the built-in one that's on the Mac. And you're probably hearing the fan in the background, which is why I don't like to use it. But you can hear me better, so that's all that's important. Oh yeah, I was talking about the last thing I was going to talk about, and that's in regards to getting the surveys and content creation and whatnot. So I'll push that off. I want to have a little bit of discussion in regards to customer surveys. Yeah, we're talking about what we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. Small business owners, and trying to come up with the ideas of creating content. What are the easiest ways to create content that are the most relevant, that are going to get the high quality content that the Google search engines are ultimately looking for. But more importantly, guys, you hear me say SEO is really just about marketing. And so I want to put a marketing spin in regards to content. Now, doesn't that sound like rocket science or the most basic terminology that you'll hear me say today? It should be that obvious, so we'll get into that. But let's start back to these the changes within the week. And Google Map Maker. This is a product that is going to cease to exist after March 31st of this year. We've been talking about its wind down for quite some time. And what Google Map Maker was something that was introduced all the way back in 2009 when Google Maps first came out. So it's been out for 8 years. And over the last 8 years, Google has been using this to collect user data, to collect information from a variety of people that are out there to build its maps interface on a global front. Google by far has the greatest index, the greatest asset in terms of global data that exists on this planet today. And a lot of that information is user inputted. And we were able to change business listings in the past for listings that were not claimed through Google Map Maker. Who needed to make any updates or whatnot. Inevitably, a lot of espionage was involved, and corruption, and people were changing certain information, and so Google really had to pull back on some of that. And compared to 2009 to today, Google Maps is integrated into so many different products throughout all of our mobile devices and whatnot. Here's just an interesting fact for you. That in the last 18 hours, listen to this, in the last 18 hours, there was more content created on the internet than there was in the first 20 years of the existence of the internet. That blows my mind. That's just, and I lived through the first 8, not the first 20, but 18 years after that. It was about a year and a half, 2 years after the internet existed that I got on, and I got in 1994. So between 1992 and 2000, how does that work? That can't be right. Not 2012. Maybe it's the first 10 years. I'm sorry. Jeez, let's go back. All right, let's change gears here. Now, getting back to Google Map Maker. User input is no longer going to be readily available. And if you've followed along what Google Maps has been doing, they kind of turned it into a game last year where you become what's called a local guide, and you can get points, and you can get to different levels. I think I did a little bit of it, and I moved from level 1 to level 2. So I'm a level 2 guide. For me to become a level 3, it's just I got to tell Google, I got to give X number of updates and Y number of reviews and X number of check-ins type of scenario. And I'm just not interested. But level 5 local guides will have the ability to make changes within Google on businesses that they don't claim. In other words, Google trusts those people that are much more active. They trust their information more than people that are not active. I would agree with that. I think it's a good move. I think this is also Google stating that they've got to fine-tune some of their data, but they've got enough data to remain competitive that they don't need to put the user push on it anymore. So it's interesting to see this, and you can become a level 5 local guide if you choose to participate in some of the games that they want you to play. All right, so I want to talk about some SEO basics here because we hear a lot of different things. The recent push in the last couple of years is content is king. And it's not quantity of content, it's quality content. But getting back to some of the basics, we look at on the page and off the page factors. And everything that's on the page are elements that we can manage. You know, simple little things like making sure that you have an XML sitemap that a search engine is able to see. Within that, you've got a robots.txt file, and in that robots.txt file, you know, you're disallowing certain folders. You're disallowing the private folder, or you're disallowing the CGI bin folder. But essentially leaving images open and posts and, you know, certain aspects of the database. You really don't want the search engines to be crawling your entire site. You know, it puts greater resources on the search engines. They don't like using resources. They want it to be as easy as possible. So between a sitemap and between a robots.txt file, make sure you know the elements of those. Those are two important things that are tend to forgotten. Different elements like a simple privacy statement or a privacy policy statement or terms and conditions. Those should be also two separate files within your site that a lot of things are missing. You're using the Google Webmaster Tool to take a look at some of these things, because Google Webmaster Tool will let you know what's suitable, and they put emphasis on the robots.txt and the sitemap. What about some of those 9 on-the-page factors? There's a document inside the LMS portal that's put together, and it's the 9 most important elements of a website that should be ultimately optimized. You know, of course, we know titles are very, very important. And what should a title of a local business website read? Well, first off, guys, is it should be English and grammatically correct. And I'm emphasizing putting bold and stars and highlights around grammatically correct. Far too often you see website title pages that would say dentists in Cary, Illinois. What? Excuse me? Who talks like that? You know, that's straight up keyword stuffing. And the search engines inevitably know now what's quality grammar and what's not. So don't try to go around that. Straight and simple. You can answer the 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, why, how. You know, within a title. Who, company name. What, their core term. Where, city name. So, well, the client that I was working on today, Stern Chiropractic, and we're doing a video shoot in the house. And, it would read Stern Chiropractic hyphen or comma chiropractor in Buffalo Grove, Illinois. And know your character limits as well. That you want your core term within the first 64 characters of the title. So absolutely don't do keyword stuffing. And make each page unique and relevant to the user. Don't forget about putting descriptions in there. They are still read. Try to keep it between 140 and 160 characters, just kind of like a tweet. Don't have duplicate descriptions and whatnot. Very straightforward, and do the same thing for H1 tags. You know, make sure the relevant sites that are for users have H1 tags within those pages. Use alt images or the alt tag for your images, because images do rank. Same thing for video. And make sure you use the HTML markup for the H review and the H card, and know what those are. The H card HTML markup, by the way, is wrapping your address with it, and it tells the search engine that, hey, this is a physical address. This is how it's formatted. And then they go and take a look at it. Okay? So just some basics. Now, the more complex side of SEO is off-the-page SEO. And at Local Marketing Source, we follow the 3-pillar approach, where, if you remember that, think of CPR, like you are trying to revive somebody.
You're trying to revive a business with local SEO. C stands for content, P stands for profiles, R stands for reviews. And when we're looking at the first C, content, people often get confused. Well, what should I write about content? And then we say as marketers, well, you should be writing content that's authoritative, that's high quality. Well, what the hell is authoritative, high quality content for a dentist or a plumber? You know, just tell me straight up what's best. Well, here's a different approach. That in sales, one of the very first sales jobs I had was at Radio Shack, selling retail. And one thing that they taught us was a FAB, a feature, advantage, and a benefit. And people don't buy features. They don't buy benefits, or sorry, advantages for a product, but they buy the benefit on how that product is going to do for them. I had a sales manager tell me once, and he says, people don't buy products or services. People buy a state. And a state is an anticipated feeling that you're going to receive from that product or service. So knowing that people based off of certain feelings that they're going to get, businesses don't buy based off of wants, they buy off of needs. And understanding your customer, or in your case perhaps you may be the small business owner, and looking at these benefits of your product or service, and that your product or service is a state that people are going to get an anticipated feeling from, that's where you should ultimately be looking at in terms of content. Now, let me explain a little bit better. That we'll take a dentist, for example, and a dentist A is a cosmetic dentist, so he makes people's mouths look good, not necessarily root canals and all that neat, crazy stuff, but does teeth whitening and implants and different things like that. So that type of dentist, a consumer is going to go there, and what are they going to get? Well, that dentist is giving that consumer, that patient, self-worth, self-esteem. They're feeling much more better about themselves, so it's probably bringing them some confidence. So now we just identified 3 different benefits of going and seeing this dentist A: self-esteem, self-worth, and confidence. Well, with these benefits, and knowing, we identified one service, we identified 3 benefits that come from that particular service. The next aspect is customer objections. And every salesperson must know what their product's objections are going to be. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes, in this case of dentistry, it's going to be, all right, well, do you sedate me? Well, what are the implications to the different types of sedation? Well, there's 4 different levels of sedation, and this one sedation, laughing gas, is just going to make you giggly and a little bit tingly, while the other one is going to completely put you out. You're not going to be aware. But there's greater risks with all this type of stuff. And so consumers are going to go through a questioning process for the product or service that they're buying, even if it's as simple as buying a Sharpie marker, the dollar store version or the $4 version over at Walgreens. As a consumer, because I just recently went through this, my questions are going to be, well, is the marker going to last as long? Is the ink going to be as dark and black? Is the ink of the cheaper one going to run a little bit more? My point is as a buyer, we always have objections. We have questions as to why we would not want to buy a particular product. Do we have to go and look elsewhere? Every single product and service has particular objections. So understanding customer objections and understanding the feelings that state is going to provide a buyer is gold for a marketer. Because when you can understand the objections and you can understand the feelings, you can now create content that addresses those objections and addresses those feelings. The easiest way to understand consumer objections and consumer feelings is a survey. So I am telling you, if you do SEO, providing a survey for your customers' customers, or your customers' patients, or your customers' clients. A survey is your best source for creating high-quality content. If you do one survey and you do it right, you could have 6 months worth of content generated from that. Now, the beautiful thing is when a survey is done right, you're doing it for your objective of obtaining first-round quality content. But mark my words on this. When a survey is done right, you're going to show stuff to your customer that they were completely unaware of. I've had people fired before because, well, my most recent survey was with a taxi company just out of Forest Park in Chicago. And we identified, and they had no idea that their dispatcher was very short, very rude, but people didn't essentially complain. We also found out that the app, their internal app, was not working on iPhone 5 or older. They had no idea. And when you started to look in the data, people were loading it up and they were moving and not placing an order. So they were losing money. And that was just 2 particular areas that we had no idea about. And I presented them with this information of saying, listen, we were able to collect 226 surveys out of 8,000 people. This is providing you regression and statistical analysis of a margin of error of plus or minus 5%. We would have liked to have gotten 350 surveys in order to have the smallest margin of error of less than 2.5% on either side. But Mr. Customer, I can say with great confidence that the data I'm going to provide you is accurate. You got problems. And they love me for it. So if you don't know how to conduct a customer survey, get the education to do so. You may think it's as simple as putting questions down on a piece of paper. I'll tell you, I took 3 separate years out of a 4-year program, multiple classes all day long, learning about statistics and statistical analysis and capturing primary market research. Now, it's not as difficult as I'm making it out to be, but there are some basics that that needed to be understood, that when you formulate and create a particular survey, identifying your objectives first, creating the questions, knowing what questions you have at your disposal and how those questions are to be mapped out, the limitations of the software. I just did a survey recently for my hockey team, and something as simple as a survey for a hockey team, even Google Forms couldn't handle what I was trying to do. I believe the question that we wanted to point was called the point matrix question. So get some education. There's a little bit of education on survey inside of Local Marketing Source, probably enough that what you need to know to create some basic business surveys. If you're working in a certain niche, like with dentists or practitioners, your surveys are going to be relatively the same from client to client as well. So on that note, I'm going to take 30 seconds and come back and answer any questions that you guys might have. You can give me any question you want, I can answer it. All right. Okay, Harry has got a good question here, and he says, he's asking, do you have the survey results sent to you or directly to the customer? I like my customers to manage all their own, or at least own their own tools, albeit we'll manage it. So, I'll set the customer up with them on SurveyMonkey, and I want them to see it, to see the data in real time. But then I export the data. On occasion, I'll run it through what's called SPSS software. I don't want to overcomplicate you with SPSS. But sometimes we want to find out certain pivot information. And you can't always do that inside the software. So we export it to Excel. And then, I'll use Excel with filters to find these pivots. What pivot is like let's say you got two questions. Question one is, are you male or female? So there's two answers. And then question two is, are you older than 25 or are you younger than 25? Okay? So what a pivot is saying, how many males over the age of 25 do I have? So answering male to question one and answering over 25 to question two. Or another scenario may be answering female to question one and under 25 to question two. That's pivoting in its most basic situation. You may want to do pivot analysis, because business surveys have got to have demographic information on it. So you may want to find out certain information in regards to certain demographics. And demographics may be, age, how old somebody is, or gender, income level, education level, or where they live, a certain zip code. Hope that helps. Bart says, do you see the benefit in becoming Google certified and the benefits that will come with it? Google certified for what, Bart? Are you talking like Google certified for PPC? Google certified for photography? Or are you referring to level 5 that we were talking about? Regardless, my answer to all that is no, not for me. If you're offering PPC services, heck yeah, you want to be certified. As an agency, I tried to get certified as a Google photographer, but everywhere I've looked, it seems that they've got a lot of photographers that are certified first, and I don't know of any agencies that have become certified in Google photography. I think it's just photography companies that Google is certifying. Google partner is what you're saying. Okay, Harry's. Do you have people that do surveys that input their actual name? Yeah, because a good motivation to get a survey, survey done, is to offer a prize, and to be able to do that, they've got to enter in their name and phone number. If you're a business dealing with customers, they're not going to be afraid to put in their name, unless it's really, really bad. But you'd be surprised. People still don't, yeah, that's me telling you that you suck. And now, we got a question here in regards to curated content. And this is one of those buzzwords within the industry that I just, really, so there's different definitions of, essentially what curated content is regards. And so I'm trying to pull up right now a definition of it. And really curate, it's an action, it's a verb, and it's really just, organizing. And so the SEO industry has begun to discuss, creating content that's curated, that's presented and organized in a readable fashion. Um, like Donald Trump curates his content on Twitter and breaks it into, multiple tweets, or a press release. I teach something called the inverted pyramid approach when creating press releases. Just think of a triangle that's upside down. And the most important information, and you take that triangle and you break it into 3 spots. And so the top third, is your most relevant information. That's your first paragraph, and that first paragraph basically covers everything. Second paragraph is the middle of the inverted pyramid, and that gets into the details, and then finally your last paragraph is just about this person and who this person and contact info. So that's another example of curated content. The term curated content, and pardon my French on this, is yet just another bullshit SEO term. The same thing as creating an avatar, for example. It was a big buzz in our industry 3 or 4 years ago to go ahead and create avatars for your customers' customers. And it was like banging my head against a brick wall because there was absolutely nothing new about this, and all creating an avatar essentially is just segmenting your audience. Well, marketers have been segmenting audiences into groups well before I've been born. Probably centuries, and they didn't even recognize that they were doing that. It's like chiropractors saying, hey, we invented the adjustment 112 years ago, but yet the Asian community has been manipulating their spine for 2,000 years. Why is it all of a sudden this new thing in America called chiropractic now? It's just spinal manipulation. Sorry if I've got any DCs on the line. But Curate is yet another one of those things. And they've got different software that's coming out to, to be able to separate content and present it in different ways. And, it's no different than spinning software, in my opinion, that you take one article and you put it into a piece of software, and that software rewrites that article 9 other times, so now you have 10 pieces of unique content. Those tricks, they don't work. Curating software, same scenario, that it doesn't understand the tone and the objective of that particular author. It's not going to get the check mark for quality of content. Creating good content is understanding who the audience it's going to first off, that's important, and addressing those feelings and objections that I was talking about. So you want to effectively create a piece of an article that's going to be well presented. I'm sorry, that's a skill, and that's just like art, and it takes practice and time to be able to effectively write good quality content. Software is not going to do it. One trick that I learned from Dan Kennedy that I like about writing content is that, utilizing headlines, you've got different types of readers. So sure, you've got different types of audience segments, but you've also got people that read content and consume content differently. I'm a headline reader. So the high-level story should be told by somebody that's skimming headlines or subheadlines or subheaders, whatever you want to call them. And so, when we go back to 3rd grade school and we're learning about the English language and we learn about what a run-on sentence is, no sentences should most of the time be more than 22 words. Knowing that a paragraph has got, an introduction sentence and a closing sentence and a body sentence. So every paragraph should, in theory, be at least 3 sentences long. And that you have a paragraph change when a subtopic or a topic changes. So good copywriting goes back to grade school. And understanding when certain adjectives are meant to be used, adverbs, verbs, and the difference of those things. And if you don't know those, go and brush up on your 3rd grade. And I mean this not in a derogatory fashion. You'd be surprised at how many adults don't know what an adverb is, or a verb, or the difference between an adjective and a verb. Especially in America. Americans have butchered the English language more than any other country that's out there, but that's a whole other conversation. Bart, how about being able to offer nonprofits 10 go in free PPC? I don't know what you're saying. How about being able to offer nonprofits 10 go in free PPC? It's the last question, so I'll hang on for a second to see if you're going to retype that or not. Okay. Maybe Bart's retyping, but Barry's got something else here. So, since you have extensive knowledge in the chiropractic field, have you created or considered creating a lot of lead gen sites using similar format and content with each site? Okay, when you're saying, like creating a lot of lead gen sites, what do you mean? Like owning those and leasing them back to the chiropractor? And Harry's asking, what are your thoughts on right-clicking and saving their image, copying it, but modifying those images, maybe cropping, but adding little text before you put them on your site? Is that allowed? And have you stated image credit on the bottom? Well, first off, in most cases, that's illegal. I don't endorse copywriting, stealing images any which way. I've been attempted to be sued in the past by, the way it works is, master files and Getty Images, they have bots that go out and crawl websites just like the search engines do, and they look at the pixel counts. And, if there's certain elements within a certain grid area of that image that matches a pixel count of any image that they have in file, they match that domain up against, their purchases. And then they go after the domain holder. And it doesn't matter who did the website or who's hosting the site or anything. Whoever owns the domain is responsible. So they'll send a threatening letter. They typically ask for anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 an image. So on about 3 or 4 occasions in my last 12 years, I've had clients that have received, $10,000 bills from these. And all of them we just ignored, except for one. We just ignored, and it went away. Because let's say there's a conspiracy that exists on the internet that it's extortion. I mean, they sell these images for $2 and $3, and then, they put them up there. I go through all the legal process with it, had an attorney involved, and the attorney basically came down and says, listen, Scott, if you ever go to court for this, they have to prove that you made more money from your site. And the fact is these websites were being charged $3,000, and so there's no way that they were going to get $9,000 out of certain images that were selling for $2. And they wouldn't do it. I had one client that paid it and came after me. And at that time, I was outsourcing all my work to India, and it was the Indians that stole these pictures, and the laws in India are that they are fully protected under copyright international laws, but Americans weren't. So it was kind of a dicey area. So ever since then, I don't ever steal an image from anywhere ever or risk it ever. I may steal an image and throw it on Facebook for fun, but never put it on a business property, period. 123RF is the source I go to. I buy credits, and they're like $1 or $2 in an image. So don't take that chance. Now, getting back to your first question, this would be creating sites and leasing it to them. Again, Harry, local marketing source, we're different than a lot of other educators that are out there. And this question you've got comes up a lot, and I see it a lot, and there's people that are out there that teach this in terms of, building sites, getting them ranked, leasing them out, and this is going back to 2009. There's a point in time that I considered that, and I'll tell you what, that I am wholeheartedly against it, because number one, it is not in the best interest of any small business to do that. It's a decisive business, because what happens is these business owners put money into marketing efforts that they don't own. And you don't hire a marketer to be a part of your business, and if you fired that marketer, that they take all their work with them. It doesn't work that way. What's happening here in these business models is people are holding other businesses hostage and leveraging that to put them in a position to bid against one another. Well, one, that's extortion. Extortion is technically illegal in the United States. Now, I'm not saying that I know of any situations that anybody's gone to court and been arrested or fined for extorting businesses. But as a business owner, when you put money into creating content, that business should own that content. So I'm a firm believer that a business owner, a small business owner, should own their website. And there's too many businesses out there that sell monthly fees and say, well, you don't own the content for it, you're only renting it from us. Well, I think that that's unethical. I think it's immoral. I go to great lengths for my client to put together what I call an IOA. It's an inventory of assets. And it's to walk into a small business and say, listen, here's every video you've ever made. Here's every business card, every article that you've ever done. Here's the usernames and passwords to every one of your sites online, all together in one file. Far too often are these doctors and plumbers and electricians, they're out doing their job. They're not very good at running their business. Well, I can come in there, not just as their SEO person, but I offer different value that when I talk about these surveys, and I can think about, a couple of my top clients that have been with me for 4 years. The amount of work we do for them every month is next to nothing. But when we offer value like the surveys and these other people trying to sell them, we look good. So I can go on in regards to why this business model that you've just described, in my opinion, is a failure. The other side of that is it's near impossible these days to rank and fictitious business that you're going to go and lease. You've got to have a legit business because you've got to have the engagement out there. And we live in a social world now, at least in the last few years, that the engagement, you can't, you know, there's people out there that teach you to go to Fiverr and buy views for your YouTube videos. There's other businesses out there that will go and leave reviews for small businesses for cheap. And then there's software out there. You know, when we talk about the 3 pillars, there's a reason why we do manual entry and we don't use any of these citation services. I'm able to rank a business any day, but it takes time, and there's just no easy way. I have never found the easy ways with the tools. Sure, in the past we've done certain things, but none of that easy stuff lasts. It never ever lasts. That's why I'm not a fan of curated content software, spinning software, article marketing software, mass distribution software, traffic guides, keywords. There's only one tool that I use for keyword research, and it's a tool I had to build. It's available on the Local Marketing Source website. If you do a search on Google for local keyword tool, you'll find us #1. Why? Because it's the best local keyword tool that exists, but it doesn't do data mining. It doesn't tell you what the keyword should be. Only a person can tell you that. Only your client can tell you that. Not a piece of software. So I am not a fan of these tools. Any more questions, guys? One more here. Good stuff. Can you change the date on a blog post to make it appear more recent if you delete the January 1 blog and then post the almost same content to June 1st? Well, yeah, in WordPress you can change the date a bit to appear more recent. But sure enough, the search engines are going to know that data is dated. Don't delete the January 1st blog. There's nothing wrong with a business. Well, just the one that's coming to mind. I can't use your dates here. But there's nothing wrong with a plumber posting January 1st to say, hey, this is how you deal with frozen pipes in Chicago. And then the next January 1st, to write an article that says this is how you deal with frozen pipes in Chicago. But you want to rewrite it to have unique content. So there's nothing wrong with businesses that regurgitate information. Let's face it, when we talk about objections and those feelings that consumers are going to have when they buy a product or a service from a local business, there's only 3 or 4 or 5 objections about any product or service that's out there anyhow. And the feeling that's going to be derived, well, you do a survey, you're only going to find 3 or 4 feelings. So there's really only so much that a plumber can talk about, or a chiropractor, or a dentist on a blog. That's why we're only producing 1 or 2 blog posts and articles a month. All right, well, I don't see any more questions. So I'm going to go ahead and end this. You guys have yourself a great week, and we will talk to you next week. Bye for now.
Well, thanks for watching the Local Marketing Industry Update. We've got these things coming out every single week, so if you liked with what you heard, just click the button right above me right here to subscribe to our channel. If you'd like to get a little bit more, right over here, go check out localmarketingsource.com. We've got free reports that you can grab. You can even register for a free marketing course to get in and see the portal. or just go ahead and follow us on some of the social channels. We'll be around. Until next time.